Heart disease is the number one cause of death for women in the United States and can affect women at any age. But despite the prevalence of heart disease in women, many don't know how to recognize the symptoms. This was the case for Linda Kiewit, who survived a heart attack in January. She's continuing treatment at Froedtert and the Medical College of Wisconsin's Cardiac Rehab Center, and now shares her story in the hopes that fewer women will experience what she has. Linda and her doctor, Stacey Gardner, joined Lake Effect's Audrey Nowakowski. Linda begins by sharing what she was experiencing before she was admitted for emergency treatment for a heart attack.
I never was guessing I would have a heart attack. I didn't believe it until they told me I was, and that was after a lot of things happening that were finally convincing me that was the case. So I had had a surgery 10 days prior, moved into the holidays, and then shortly afterward, started back at work. I noticed that I was having kind of indigestion and a little bit of heartburn, and that continued for a couple days. I have a history of reflux. I assumed it was reflux. I was treating like it was reflux, but it wouldn't quite go away. At the same time, it wasn't constant. It wasn't alarming. It was something that I thought, hey, maybe this is something related to post-surgery. Maybe I'm eating wrong coming out of the holidays. There's always an intense time for eating. Maybe I'd eaten oddly then. Just really didn't anticipate it. And then finally, on the final morning, I'd switched medications again. I woke up. I felt like, hey, this is going away. And then it came back. So then I called my surgeon, and he immediately said, you know what, I think you need to have this checked out. So that's when I went to the hospital. And even waiting to be seen, I was embarrassed. I thought, well, this is ridiculous. They're going to, take a look at me and say you have indigestion, give me a prescription level antacid and sent me home. Well, that's not what happened.
And how many days of indigestion did you say it was?
It started on a Wednesday, and I went in on Saturday morning.
Okay, so prolonged indigestion problems. And then what was that conversation like when they told you what was actually happening?
It was traumatizing. They initially took my blood pressure. They were concerned. They then immediately took an EKG, and the EKG was so alarming they thought they had made a mistake, and they took another one right away. And my husband later told me he was facing the EKG technician. I was not. He saw the EKG technician's face change and knew we were in trouble. So then they called what they call rapid response and told me a lot of people would be entering my area. They were there to take care of me, and then they continued to take steps to save me. In the ER, a lot was happening very quickly and in a very reassuring way as a patient, as reassured as you can be in that situation. But we immediately, both my husband and I knew immediately that there was something very wrong. At the same time, ER chaos is an odd thing. I'm not a huge fan of ER shows, but that's what it reminded me of because it's controlled chaos. Everybody's doing exactly what they know they're supposed to be doing at the same time as someone who doesn't know what's happening. You are understanding the seriousness of it. And then when they were communicating to me what was going to happen next, they were calling in a cath team, and they were explaining to me what they were going to do. I started questioning them and said, why would you do this? What is actually happening? And then they gave me more information, and that's when I got very scared.
So and then they explicitly stated you're having a heart attack.
They used words that explain that without being over-alarming to maintain some level of calm. Mm-hmm. They had lots of resources come in and, be with my husband because he was standing there alone watching me have it and seeing everything that was happening. Him and I immediately communicated about different people to call and what to do next. And you do what you do when you know that you're in a very serious health situation that you're not sure if you're going to come out of.
So the onset was indigestion. That's something I would never assume is an indicator of a heart attack. So Dr. Gardner, you treated Linda, and with this presentation of symptoms, it can be different for anyone, but symptoms do differ somewhat in women compared to men, right? Can you walk us through some of the common indicators that we might not be thinking about?
Sure. Linda, thank you for sharing your story. So it's still important to remember that for all comers, both men and women, that chest pain, chest pressure, chest heaviness, however you want to describe it, discomfort in the chest is still the most common symptom for both men and women. But it is true that women tend to have more unusual symptoms. Indigestion is definitely a presentation I have heard on multiple occasions, in addition to other things, extreme exhaustion, excessive, tiredness, nausea, pain in other places, jaw pain, back pain, shoulder pain, neck pain. And the presentation can be different for everybody. And we have to really be extra vigilant, I think, in women because they are more likely to have these atypical symptoms. I should also say shortness of breath would be a really common one in women. So when you hear these sort of things, it does raise some alarms.
Now, Linda, you mentioned you were slightly embarrassed to go in or were expecting to just kind of be told off and, you're just experiencing this, here you go, come back another time. But, this is an example of women who wait longer to get treatment, not just for heart attacks, for a lot of things, but women wait almost 40 hours longer than men when it comes to heart attack treatment. So, Linda, you can speak about this personally, but Dr. Gardner, I'm interested in your perspective as well. Why is this?
I think it's a multitude of factors, but I think that women in general are caregivers. They tend to worry a lot about the people around them, the people they love, and sometimes they put themselves on the back burner and might not even realize the symptoms that they're having and have a tendency to sometimes ignore really alarming symptoms. But that being said, historically, most of what we understand about heart disease was done on studies that were mostly conducted on middle-aged men. And that's changed now, but if you look at sort of the representation in clinical trials, women are still underrepresented in clinical trials. And so what we understand about heart disease and how to treat heart disease is still not completely reflective of women. So I think that women may ignore their symptoms. That leads to a delay. Medical professionals may not take the symptoms seriously initially, especially if they don't have as many traditional risk factors. And this all leads to delays in diagnosis and delays in treatment.
Do you feel differently about things, Linda? I imagine your experience, you're cautioning everyone to, don't ignore or watch out for things.
Yeah, everything changes, to be frank. It changes in the best ways. And it also, I guess it's the best way. Everything changes. But, everything clarifies very quickly in those moments. It's supposed to. And part of your healing is also supposed to be that you forget some of it, which is good. It's a good thing. But in terms of how I feel about my body now, I'm incredibly in tune to it. I need to be, because there's certain things I need to look for to ensure I don't run into trouble again. While in the ICU after, I said, I need to get the word out about this because I'm of a certain age. I'm very young, relatively healthy to have a heart attack, but I had it, and I had what they call the widowmaker. It was as serious as it gets. And so I talked to everyone about it, which is sometimes a little bit TMI, but it's really important. And this is another example, I think, of women, is that we are often unlikely to share some of the hardest parts that we're dealing with our health because we're somehow made to feel guilty if we're not in our best shape. But we also, as caregivers and as, child bearers, our bodies go through a lot. We take on a lot. We have to take care of ourselves. When I was in the hospital, my cardiologist there, he said, you're going to have a part-time job, which is taking care of your heart for a while. And that means a completely different diet, focusing on myself, learning to say no, so that I can really focus my energy on things that are important to me and going to cardiac rehab. Because the thing about the rehab is that I'm unfortunately part of a club that you don't really want to be a part of anymore, and that's someone who's had, a heart attack. And not many people understand what that's like. So it's helpful to have people there, too, to talk to. And, the care team there understands it, and that helps a lot as well. So it's the upside of this very hard situation.
I guess I would also add that sort of as part of the post-heart attack journey is that we really want to focus on risk factors. So whether you've never had a heart attack or you've already had a heart attack, we really concentrate on optimizing your risk factors. And so for both men and women, the number one risk factors are smoking, diabetes, high blood pressure, obesity, sedentary lifestyle, high cholesterol. Those are the things that we focus on. However, there really are some unique risk factors that we should pay attention to in women. Things like gestational diabetes, so diabetes in pregnancy, hypertension in pregnancy, those actually give you an increased risk of having cardiac events later on in life. Premature menopause, so menopause before age 40 will increase your risk for cardiac events. Things like depression, which are a little bit more common in women. But even if you look at things like inflammatory conditions, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, those conditions are more common in women, but also are what we would consider risk enhancers. They do enhance your risk for later cardiac events. So yes, even though you have already had a heart attack and the horse is out of the barn, we really have to optimize all of those risk factors the best we can to prevent subsequent events.
Right.
I would like to actually put an exclamation point on that, because when I was in the hospital post-heart attack, the cardiologist asked me a number of questions, and I kept saying yes, yes, yes. There were risk factors I didn't know I had. And it may have altered some choices I made in my lifestyle if I had known that. And the gestational diabetes is a perfect example of that. I had never had that conversation before. So that awareness alone can really help someone understand their potential risk.
Linda Kiewit is a heart attack survivor, and Dr. Stacy Gardner is an assistant professor at Froedtert and the Medical College of Wisconsin. She's also one of the people who treated Linda. They spoke with Lake Effect's Audrey Nowakowski.